I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, a British minister is forced to resign over secret meetings in Israel. The Me Too campaign against sexual harassment hits the Holy Land, and we're counting down the top 5 Israeli technologies that are rocking the world. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. After coming under fire for conducting secret meetings with Israeli officials, British Minister Priti Patel has just shockingly resigned from office. These meetings, which included a discussion with Prime Minister Netanyahu and a trip to an Israeli hospital treating Syrian refugees, ignited fierce controversy in England and quickly torpedoed her political career. Patel is said to have had 12 separate meetings with various Israeli officials back in August to discuss improving UK-Israeli relations. At the time, however, she had told the UK's foreign ministry that she was merely on a family vacation. When news first exploded of these undisclosed meetings, it was seen as a breach of policy, though not necessarily a career ender. But it was Patel's trip to an Israeli hospital for Syrian refugees in the Golan Heights that sealed her fate. That's because England, like many of the world's countries, doesn't recognize Israel's control of the Golan Heights. In the eyes of the British government, it doesn't matter what Patel's humanitarian motives were, they see the trip as a complete and total game ender. Those on the other end of the argument, of course, see this as a blatant anti-Israel bias, and an ironic one at that. England has historically refused to designate Hamas's political wing as a terror organization, for example, and also of note is that a top Palestinian official from the PLO all but demanded that the UK's Prime Minister sack Patel over the visit. Prime Minister May has, as it turns out, just accepted Patel's letter of resignation, responding, "It is right that you have decided to resign." Now, for the first time in 8 months, the Palestinian Authority has finally allowed life-saving medical aid to enter the Gaza Strip. This aid package, over $2 million of critical medicine, comes after months of the PA's blockade against Gaza, a controversial tactic that has, however, given way to the current reconciliation talks with Hamas. ILTV's Aaron Porce is here in the studio to explain the story.
Yes, thank you, Natasha. And actually, you've just touched on really the heart of the issue, i.e., the difficulty for Palestinians living in Gaza to reconcile their deep wanting of a unity between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority with the terrible humanitarian conditions that they're currently living in.
But wouldn't all aspects of this humanitarian crisis come to an end if Hamas and Fatah were to finish their negotiations successfully, or at least most of the issues in this humanitarian crisis?
Unfortunately, that's not terribly clear either. First of all, if we turn to the West Bank, many of the Palestinians living in the West Bank are also living in less than desirable conditions. But if we stick with putting our focus on Gaza, even if unity talks are successful, there are a lot of other issues that need to be addressed. There's electricity shortages, there's food shortages, there's job shortages. And even, again, after the unity talks, even if the Palestinian Authority starts to tackle these issues...
You still have a blockade from Israel.
You still have a blockade from Israel, and then you still have the fact that the Palestinian Authority was the one to impose a lot of these sanctions on Gaza in the first place, which breeds mistrust among the Gazan population, which that, in turn, threatens everything that they're working for. But I'll tell you a little bit more in my report right now.
Coming amidst ongoing Palestinian unity talks with Hamas, this shipment of medicine is the first real effort by the PA to help the suffering people of Gaza. But many blame the horrific conditions in the Strip, including denying funds for medical treatments and a crippling energy crisis, squarely on the PA to begin with. That's because President Abbas imposed the blockade in order to force Hamas into the current negotiation talks, which so far have yielded success for Abbas's government. Last week, the PA officially took control of all Gaza border crossings from Hamas. And not only that, but Abbas's police chief has just confirmed that all security cooperations with Israel have resumed to full capacity as well.
We do meet normally. Things are normal now. Yeah. It's back.
While the shipment of medical aid, over $2 million worth of medicines and treatments, comes at a critical time, many Gazans are still skeptical that conditions will improve anytime soon. A recent change in Israeli policy just doubled the waiting time for Gazans hoping to secure rare exit visas, meaning that the people of Gaza are still at the mercy of Palestinian leaders to improve the humanitarian crisis.
It's been weeks since these stories have broken, but it never seems to feel any less shocking when we hear of more sexual assault allegations against celebrities like Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein and actor Kevin Spacey. But it turns out these allegations are a necessity because more and more women and victims from around the world are finally speaking up. And now here in Israel, record numbers are joining the call as well by saying, "Me too." Those are the words that have come to define the women's movement against sexual assault. Words that you tragically see all over social media of countless women who say that they too have been victims of abuse. Here in Israel, those words are also evolving into action. New numbers show that calls to women's rape crisis centers in Israel have surged ever since the Me Too campaign first hit the internet. Some centers have seen a 20% spike, while in others, calls have nearly doubled. Women's courage to speak out about these crimes is undoubtedly helped by the countless celebrities who have gone public about their abuse in Hollywood. That's along with rally cries from celebs like Gal Gadot, who call for women everywhere to unite against fear. In related news, police have just arrested a Jerusalem man who was defacing billboards all over the city and removing women's faces from lineups of men. Let's hope this revolution doesn't stop and that Israel will crack down on every last crime against women. The cost of real estate here in Israel just keeps on climbing, and the limited market is making it more and more difficult for families to even find affordable homes to rent or buy. Well, now a new building project in Ra'anana is attempting to change that, and joining us is a project manager of the Lubin On The Park housing complex. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Yonit, what are some of the issues that Israeli families face in this country when it comes to renting apartments?
As you know, the market, in the Israeli market, the price and the cost of buying an apartment, a new apartment, for a young couple is very, very expensive. People wish to stay in Ra'anana and to keep their families close by, their parents maybe, if they were raised there, and they'd like to stay in the city where they raised.
But the rising costs is making it so that, yes, people are having to leave these areas, and it doesn't help. There's also a lack of apartments available as a result, and landlords that can essentially change the cost of the rent, right? So tell us about the Rubenstein on the Park housing complex, which is the first ever of its kind. What is it? How did you come up with the idea, and how does it combat these issues?
Okay, we have 14 buildings, which are all the neighborhood is for rent. 238 apartments, starting from 4-room apartments, 4.5 duplexes. Everything is for rent, for a long-term rental. That means that you can rent 5.5 years until 20 years, and you have your security, your safety. Nobody will take you out from the apartment, so people really like it.
And it's rent controlled? Can landlords bring up the rent or no?
It's together with the index. Except for that, nothing raises.
Wow, so that is essential because that is exactly the issue that so many people are dealing with. So, this is one way that you're combating the issues of high rent and high, high cost real estate. What are other ways that we can combat the high cost of real estate here in Israel?
I think what people do, either they rent like for a long term, like our project, or they buy like a small apartment in a place they wouldn't like to live even, and they rent it, and they rent somewhere else wherever they wish to live. And that's the only solution I can find, really.
Well, I guess we're going to have to wait and see if there are more projects like this that end up coming out, because clearly they're going to be helping. Well, thank you so much for joining us to tell us about this, and good luck.
Thank you.
All right, you won't believe this, but an Israeli soccer star has just pulled a literal Frankenstein. Yaniv Bardot was nailed in the chest with a soccer ball so hard during a match this week that he went into cardiac arrest. And even though it seemed like he was about to see the light, first responders managed to shock him back to life just in time. So, first of all, you can relax, soccer fans. The captain and star of Beersheva's championship team is recovering in the hospital and doing just fine. The freak event of Bardot's, let's call it resurrection, is the result of an incredibly rare medical occurrence when the heart is disrupted by a forceful blow to the chest during a split second between heartbeats. Like, say, the kind you get when a high-speed soccer ball nails you in the pecs. Fans and teammates watched in horror when Bardot lost consciousness on the field and feared the worst when medics rushed to his side. Thankfully, a Magen David Adom ambulance happened to be nearby, and after 4 shocks with a defibrillator, successfully shocked him back to life. Some players can save a game from going south, but it's not every soccer player who can actually come back from the grave. Well, after 100 years sitting in limbo, one of the world's most important collections of ancient Hebrew manuscripts is finally being released to the public. That's right, Russia's Gunzburg Collection, which contains thousands of rare books on Jewish law, prayer, and mysticism, is being digitized in a joint Russian-Israeli project. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here for the analysis. And Brett, my first question is, why has it taken 100 years to release all this in the first place?
Thanks, Tasha. Well, we've got to go back quite a ways to really understand what happened and, of course, what it says about Russian-Israeli relations. Now, the story goes that a Zionist activist actually bought the collection from a Jewish-Russian aristocrat named David Gunzburg way back in 1917, and obviously he wanted it shipped to Israel. Problem is, this was at the height of World War I, and then, of course, the Bolshevik Revolution broke out in Russia, putting a total freeze on almost all international shipping. Now, eventually, the Soviet army seized the collection, declared it property of the Russian government, and despite decades of Israeli lobbying, it's been sitting in Russia's state library ever since.
You know, it's interesting because, of course, there's a huge Russian population here and tons of Jewish immigration coming here from Russia since the beginning of the state.
Sure. Well, Russian is actually the 3rd most commonly spoken language here in Israel after Hebrew and Arabic, which says a lot.
Yeah, everybody thinks I'm Russian because my name's Natasha.
Sure, and I'd say this release actually says a lot about how much Israel's ties with Russia have kind of changed over the years since then. They went from enemies during the Cold War to very close in the 70s, well into the 90s during the first wave of Russian aliyah to Israel, and now with Putin allied with Assad's regime in Syria, Israel's walking kind of a different line with Russia now, but let's go ahead and take a look at the Gunzburg Collection in the report.
The Israeli government has been struggling for decades to release the enormous 14,000-item collection from the Russian State Library. But where years of negotiations have failed, a Russian Muslim billionaire has stepped in and succeeded. Ziauddin Magomedov, Russia's 58th wealthiest man, has just committed the funds needed to digitize the entire collection in perfect preservation, which means soon historians and readers all over the world will be able to explore the never-before-seen texts revealing ancient secrets of Jewish prayer, law, biblical commentary, and even mysticism. It only took 100 years, but hopefully it was well worth all the waiting.
You're going to want to listen up closely to our next interview, ladies and gentlemen, because it's all about, well, your sex life. And Israeli startup says they have the solution to premature ejaculation, so it's no wonder men are celebrating across the world. Joining us now is Tal Golan, the founder and CEO of Virility Medical. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's begin with the issue, which is a pretty taboo subject, but is very common. How common is premature ejaculation, and why did you choose to tackle this issue?
Well, about 20 to 30% of the male population have this problem.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very common.
So why did you choose to tackle it?
Well, I chose to focus on the aesthetics field. And then, of course, as you know, many applications in the aesthetics fields relate to Botox injections.
Yeah.
And after reading several articles, I came across an article describing article written by a brilliant urologist, Dr. Serafoglu, in which he described Botox injections to postpone ejaculation and prolong the sexual acts.
Interesting.
Yeah, and soon after I realized that I can conduct the same muscle manipulation as Botox using electrical stimulation.
Very interesting. So the solution, explain the solution in simple terms for those of us who don't understand how this works.
Well, ejaculation is typically using during ejaculation there are typical muscle contractions which propels the semen out of the urethra.
Okay.
We use electrical stimulation to inhibit those typical muscle contractions.
Wow, interesting. Okay, so this is a very sexy topic. Anybody who's watching this or heard my intro probably is still watching us right now because this is just not something we usually talk about. Is this available to the public yet?
Well, not yet, but we are planning to have a product by the middle of next year.
Okay, beautiful. Well, for those of you who are interested, this is your man. Thank you so much for joining us and telling about this. All right. All right, it looks like the Israeli Air Force is kicking girl power into fifth gear, or should we say Mach 5. For the first time ever, a woman has been promoted to deputy commander of an elite jet squadron. Her name is under tight wraps for obvious security reasons, but even with no name, the new deputy commander just became a huge role model for female officers and pilots throughout the Army. This is the first time in Army history that a woman will hold such a prestigious rank. The new deputy commander is set to serve the IAF Spearhead Squadron, an elite team of F-15 fighters based in the Tel Nof Air Force Base in central Israel. The Army just announced 2 more major leaps forward for womankind, promoting 2 other female deputy commanders to oversee the military's drone units. While these are certainly important victories in the fight for gender equality, the Army still has a way to go. It should be noted that 14 new colonels and brigadier generals were also just promoted, a list that included only 1 woman. Advancements for women have been especially tough in the male-dominated Air Force. Women actually flew jets in Israel's War for Independence and the 56 Sinai War, but were then banned from manning military aircraft. It took another 5 decades for the state to finally allow the very first female pilot, Sheri Rachat, to fly in the Air Force. You hear that, ladies? So let's keep it up. Speaking of power women, an ancient mosaic has just been unearthed in Israel's Galilee, and it's giving historians convincing new evidence that, guess what, guys, women might have worn the pants back in the day. Not that we don't already, of course. The discovery dates back to the 5th century and commemorates a woman named Susan, which would be Shoshana in modern terms. But what makes this mosaic unique is that Susan is credited totally on her own without any male modifiers. In other words, she's not Joe's wife Susan, she's just Susan in all her independent power and glory. The find gives a lot of proof to the theory that Byzantine-era Christian societies actually held women in much esteem and rank than previously imagined. This Susan in question is believed to have been the chief donor to a nearby church, which certainly speaks volumes about how powerful women could become in ancient Christian life in the Galilee. So, you go, Suzanne, get it, girl. All right, well, if the sight of certain 8-legged creepy crawlers gives you the chills, you might want to squint through parts of this next story. Thousands of spiders have just spun a massive web, transforming a Jerusalem forest into a magical meadow of Disney-like proportions. Check this out. What you're seeing is an incredibly rare natural occurrence, the likes of which have never been seen before in the Middle East. These are cobwebs, my friend, spun by thousands of, get ready for it because here it comes, spiders. These long-jawed spiders are native to the area, but usually only in small numbers, and never working together as groups like these. But nutrients from a nearby runoff led to a spike in mosquitoes, sending spider populations skyrocketing. And as you can see, their massive web is truthfully a one-of-a-kind sight to see.
What you can see here is that they have constructed something completely different. They're constructing this great sheet which is used both for locomotion between different parts of the tree and for laying eggs, and probably the hunting thing. They hunt with them, of course, but probably the hunting thing is just something marginal. This is not normal for them to make these great sheets of fine webbing.
But Israelis won't have much longer to visit this enchanted spider forest for themselves, because as soon as winter temperatures start to drop, so will these creepy crawly web spinners. Going to the dentist can be expensive, so it's no surprise that many Israelis try to save every penny when it comes to more costly dental work. Joining us now is Benny Rosenberg, the CEO and founder of EasyDent, a company that is dedicated to dental tourism. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello.
So tell us a little bit, what does your company do?
We are a traveling company for dentists, for treatments in Romania and Moldova as well.
Okay.
We take Israelis, give opportunities to Israelis to get a fair cost, for the dentist.
Well, because here, we have a public healthcare system, but dental work, many people choose to go to private dentists, which makes it more costly, right?
Right. I give you an example, like, let's say implant with abutment and the crown costs in Israel average 6,000 shekel. With us, it's less than 4,000 shekel with the cost of flights and hosting and everything.
Wow, that's
and their flight twice. I mean, the first time they put temporary.
And you get a little vacation, right?
And vacation as well, yes.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
If you call it vacation,
If you call that vacation to get dental work, but you are going to a new place. So how did you guys come up with this idea?
Oh, I'm working in that area like almost 15 years, and I searched about it, and I saw a lot of students, Israeli students, going to study there. Just to tell you, they say like around 50% of doctors from Israel study there. I mean, east of Europe,
right? That's true.
In Romania. So I work with the teachers.
Interesting. So how many people have utilized your company so far? And you said that they're traveling to primarily Moldova and Romania, but are there other countries as well that Israelis are traveling to with your company?
Many people going there?
Yeah.
Quite much. I mean, we are developing all the time.
Yeah.
And, one bring one, two. This is how it works,
Right, once it's word of mouth.
Because, they don't know where to go or where they're going, but it's okay. They're coming more comfortable. And they have also support in Israel. I mean, we have also a clinic here. If they have some problem, break or pain or something like this, they have also insurance here.
And you said that it saves about 30 to 50%.
30 to 50%,
wow,
exactly.
That's unbelievable.
If you say 6,000, compared to us less than 4,000, it's 35%.
Beautiful. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us, Benny, and telling us about this. This is something that I think a lot of Israelis are going to want to utilize.
Thank you very much.
All right, up next is our top 5 with ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh.
I'm here to give you guys the top 5 technological advances made by Israelis. Well, the first and most commonly known would for sure be Waze, the mobile app developed back in 2008 by an Israeli startup that helps you drive around and even avoid traffic. It's all based on user-generated data straight from your phone's GPS. Waze is very popular in big cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Boston, but you can also find Wazers in Italy, France, Sweden, and the list goes on. At number 2, you know that place you go to when you just need a quick answer to something? Oh yeah, Answers.com. Well, guess what? That site was developed by the Israeli company GuruNet and founded in Jerusalem. The technology was first pioneered back in 1999, and in 2005, GuruNet changed its name to Answers Corporation. By 2011, the site has surpassed 11 million answers. At number 3, anyone remember those tiny little chip-like devices that stored all your info, pics, and online files? Yep, the disk on key or the flash drive comes from Israel. Israeli firm M Systems developed the tech after launching in 2000. 5 years later, PC World called it the world's top 10 gadgets in the last 50 years. And the company was purchased a year later by the SanDisk Corporation for $1.6 billion. Number 4 is for all you bookworms out there. The Java platform that's inside Amazon's best-selling Kindle was, you guessed it, developed here in Israel. Amazon worked with the team in Herzliya to develop a prototype, and when they nailed the design, manufacturing commenced. And by the way, Amazon is a world leader in all things e-reader. And number 5 helped pretty much every high school and college student spice up their school essays. Yes, I'm talking about the computer dictionary and translation program, Babylon. The killer software was developed by an Israeli company called Babylon Software Ltd, based in Or Yehuda, right here in the Holy Land. Amnon Ovadia was the genius entrepreneur who established the company back in 1997. And that's all for today. Stay tuned for our next top 5. Back to you.
Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Apparently there's been a massive rise in the population of spiders in Israel this year, so we figured that you should probably know what to call them. That's why today's word is akavish, meaning spider. Now, a lot of people are afraid of akavishim or spiders, and if you're one of those people, maybe you better cover your ears because, spoiler alert, akavishim are everywhere. Depending on where you are, a tiny akavish could literally be right under your shoes, or at least surrounding you on all sides with their friends. The good news, though, is that these little 8-legged guys are practically always helpful and almost never a threat to humans. So next time you see an akavish, don't scream and stand on the table. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be partly cloudy with a slight rise in temperatures and a low of 60 or 16 degrees Celsius. Over the weekend, you can expect little to no change in temperatures and partly cloudy skies with a high of around 76 or 24 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.51 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.